Ask yourself, why does a general bombard a hill? Is it because other successful generals bombard hills? Or is it because a general has a map of the landscape and can see where it might be useful to bomb, and why there instead of somewhere else? Generals use maps to improve situational awareness. But what is situational awareness, and why is it so important? Let's try to answer that with two short stories. The first is Chess World. Imagine that you live in a world where your social status depends on how well you play chess. The only problem is, no one has ever seen a chessboard before. The only thing you see are these pieces on a computer screen. You line up against your opponent like this, and to make a move, you press a button, which appears like this on the screen. Your opponent responds, you press again. And your opponent responds, and you keep on doing this until somebody wins. But one day you come up against an opponent who can see something almost magical. Your opponent can see the chessboard. Now when you press a button to make a move, your opponent can see how your move has changed the situation and what options they have before they respond. Once they do, you press a button, blindly making your next move, and you lose. And you ask yourself, what on earth happened there? Maybe you decide this is some secret combination involving the queen, so you write it down to use next time, but you lose again. So maybe you start to think that your opponent has some other magical skills. Maybe they're pressing the button in a really agile way. And that's how an entire industry has grown up around business, dedicated to finding winning combinations from the past to sell them as secrets of success for the future. And some of this advice borders on the ridiculous, such as a HBR article on how earlobes can signify leadership potential. What's really happening, of course, is that your opponent can see the board, understand how it's changing, and create good responses. Your opponent has high situational awareness. But you have low situational awareness. You can't see the board or how the situation is changing. All you can do is blindly repeat past secrets of success, like moving the queen and hoping it brings you victory. So ask yourself a question. What would you use to learn if you lived in Chess World? Past secrets of success? Or would you prefer to be able to see the chessboard? Now ask yourself, what do we use to learn in business today? This might be an uncomfortable answer for many organizations to admit. The second story about situational awareness is about Themistocles, an Athenian politician and general who had one big problem. A huge army of Persians were invading Greece. Fortunately, Themistocles had a map and created a counter-strategy. He would send the Greek navy north to block the Straits of Artemisium and thereby force the huge Persian army along a narrow coastal road towards Thermopylae, where they would have to go through a narrow pass known as the Hot Gates. Waiting in ambush for them there would be 7,000 Athenians and 300 Spartans. Themistocles used the landscape to negate the Persians' numerical advantage and try and hold off the invasion. Now imagine that you're part of the Greek army, and before you set off to face the Persians, Themistocles is giving a motivational speech. He starts talking about how you must defend Greece and Greek values. You're feeling highly motivated. But then he says, unfortunately, I don't have a map. Therefore, I can't see the landscape, and I don't have a strategy. But, he continues, do not fear, for I have created a SWOT analysis. Our strengths, he says, are that we have a well-trained Spartan army on our side, and we also have a high level of motivation not to become Persian slaves. Our weaknesses, though, are that the Spartans might not turn up, but we do know a lot of Persians are definitely turning up. We have the opportunity to get rid of the Persians and the Spartans because, after all, we're Athenian and we hate Sparta. But the threats are that the Persians get rid of us. And the Oracle says a really dodgy film might be made about this in 2,000 years' time. Now ask yourself a question. What would you use to determine and communicate strategy in battle? A map showing position and potential for movement, or a magic framework? And ask yourself, what do we usually use in business? And this too might be an uncomfortable answer for many organizations to admit. Good strategy requires situational awareness. You need to be able to see what's happening around you how it's changing, and what your options are. But there's a lot of bad strategy in business. That's why some executives appear to have given up on strategy altogether. They prefer to have first-rate execution instead. Now, this is all well and good in theory, but if you're in battle and the general orders you to start firing rapidly, but doesn't tell you where to aim, you're unlikely to make much of an impact on your opponent except by accident. Now, if your opponent is also firing randomly, that's okay. But what happens if you come across somebody who knows where to aim? Now you're in real trouble, no matter how rapidly you keep firing. So to learn how we can use situational awareness to create better strategy, we turn to the original master, Sun Tzu. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu advised leaders to appraise the situation on the basis of the following 5 criteria. First, you must have a focus, or a purpose, that brings the thinking of the people in line with their leadership. This is often expressed as a mission. Second, you need to be able to see the landscape, the challenge it presents, or opportunities it provides, in the same way that Themistocles used the narrow passage at Thermopylae. Third, you must understand how climate might change that landscape. For example, in summer you may need a boat to cross a river, but in winter, if the river freezes, you might be able to walk across it. This is how climate changes the landscape. Fourth is military doctrine, the principles your army operates by. For example, every army needs to know how to follow orders and fire weapons. But if you only learn after the battle has started that your army doesn't know how to do these, then you're in trouble. That's why operating principles are important. And lastly, there are command decisions that leaders make, which is where they decide which move to make and why. Most leaders understand that the most important question in strategy is why. But there are 2 types of why. There is the why of purpose. Why are we making this decision? What will it bring us? Going back to chess world, we can say that the why of purpose is to win, and decisions are made to try and achieve that. But there's also a second type of why, the why of movement. This answers the question, why should we make this move here and not that one there? Because in order to win, a leader must learn how movement changes the situation before making their decisions. Unfortunately, many leaders completely ignore the why of movement. They go straight from mission to command decisions based on little more than gut instinct. They're unable to see the landscape, have no idea how the situation is changing, or what their organization's capabilities are. They're playing chess without being able to see the board, blindly copying past secrets of success. Without situational awareness, you have no strategy. You are reduced to tactics, fixating on who must do what, by when, and merely hoping for the best. That is why Sun Tzu wrote, "Leaders who know these 5 steps will be victorious, but leaders who don't know them will fail." This is why situational awareness is so important to the art of strategy.